Morning, everybody. Next 20 minutes, gonna deal about the contrary point of that one. But first, let's ask me, how many of you are running a company or a unit or a team? All right, so most of you, from the one or the other perspective, you know that situation. And what we do, I mean my company, is helping other companies, organizations, leaders to shape their mindset towards another kind of mindfulness. So it's not so much the personal mindfulness behind that. It's more about strategic decisions, focusing on what's happening in the future and how probably models that they don't know might help them on that way. And I share that with you today. Okay, we're working with Megatrends. These are these big drivers of our society and of our organizations. That's nothing we defined or invented. The idea is that these megatrends are kind of not of an underground map, but I know it looks like. It's the big things that are happening around us, and the metaphor is that we don't see them in our daily life too well. It's, for example, the megatrend new work, it's knowledge culture, it's something like the globalization, of course, mobility, connectivity, urbanization, security. And what you see, these little dots are so-called subtrends. So we name it in a certain way because it's nothing that is discussed very frequently in today. But I think it's pretty important and pretty interesting as well to have that marked as a semantic layer, to have a kind of navigation for what will happen. So this is a pretty simple model. It helps you to navigate pretty much. Now, I'm going to dive deeper into some of these megatrends and combine that with some models and methods we share with our customers. One of these megatrends, of course, is connectivity. Many of you would call it digitalization. For us, digitalization is something that's a consequence from that connectivity thing. I mean, digitalization does exactly nothing. It's what you do it. And to show what digitalization or connectivity has to do with today's life or with technology is a pretty old example from that guy. Probably you realize who it was before. It's Thomas Watson in the year 1943. And he said something very interesting, which was totally wrong, as we know today. But to make the first main point already, that future is nothing linear and future is nothing that is based on a product perspective, he was right. Because he was talking about that thing. It was the ENIAC, the first electronumerical integrator and computer or something. And why he was probably right from his perspective is that this not so tiny computer had a certain volume. And no wonder that he said, well, probably 5 companies will have that thing in their business. Now, what changed is basically everything, and it looks like that. So it's our life in a nutshell, pretty much. And if he would have known that it's not about the technology, about the hardware, but about the services, about building platforms, he would have suggested that probably there will be a market for more computers than 5. If we have a look on all these services and applications that went into that little computer, a very interesting quote came up into my mind, and it's simply saying if everything is connected, and we all know that this is happening and getting even more, everything matters. And from a leader, manager, or personal perspective, this is getting really tricky, because how can we navigate that? And another megatrend that's pushing even further into that problem is the megatrend individualization, which has two parts. On the one hand, we want to be very transparent and connected. On the other hand, very unique. And this is something that was shown 2007 by that man.
Is a widescreen iPod with touch controls. The second is a revolutionary mobile phone. And the third is a breakthrough internet communications device. So, three things: a widescreen iPod with touch controls, a revolutionary mobile phone, and a breakthrough internet communications device. An iPod, a phone, and an internet communicator. An iPod, a phone. Are you getting it?
Now, I think the very interesting point here is, if you imagine that these keynotes are full of experts and still no one actually was getting it, reminded me that we're probably sometimes too close of what might happen as experts as well. And I think pretty good picture for that one is this. As someone who has to take decisions, I think in a world like it feels today, we feel like this. And an explanation for that one is, in my eyes, pretty simple. So we are in a rising, complex world with very different facets. And especially as leaders, we are trained to take control, to keep control, but we're losing it. And what follows now is to offer you some models and methods that might bring you another feeling of controlling things or of switching perspective about that one. So that's pretty generic. Let's say we know nothing and we leave our comfort zone. And the target or the result should be to connect these dots and to emerge. We would say, yeah, that's a no-brainer, but there's a little test that was run already in 1993. It was a validated test with more than 1,000 people, so it's not like let's have fun during the afternoon. And the question is very simple. You should find 100 opportunities to find use cases for a paperclip. The results were amazing. 98% of children in kindergarten did that. That's pretty cool. Then 10-year-old children were not so good at it. 15-year-old children, 12%. And that was not the age of computer games. So no stupid kids playing all day. And you can imagine now that the 2% of adults are a very critical result, I think. Now, why and how and what could be a new approach and probably a new form or a new idea of mindfulness towards organizational strategies. I think the first premise is that knowledge is not a fact. This is where we came from. The knowledge culture in history was that the powerful people defined what knowledge means. Today we're a bit more clever in saying, okay, knowledge is a product, which means is very fluid and probably not resisting too long. And the question I'm putting over with my customers or when I'm in a dialogue with that topic is that, do you have an idea where you are today towards that question? In which perspective do you perceive what knowledge means for you, for your organization, for your employees and teammates? And a very simple model coming from Simon Sinek is the golden circle. And to have that on a pretty generic level, because we're a very broad audience here, The what is something that might be answered pretty simple in a leadership role. So it's about identifying these blind spots, creating these rooms, making that knowledge available. The how is okay if you're a bit advanced in your mindset, be your own an ambassador. Build that trust and mobilize these resources. But the why is pretty interesting and the probably hardest question to answer. From a Megatrends perspective, that says that not products are defining trends or having the change. It's the society that's responsible for change. It's the labor market that's changing. Of course, it's digitalization. And it's probably the why to shape your own organization towards an anti-fragile organization. I'll come to that in some minutes. And anti-fragile is not the opposite of fragile. So, shortcut at that point. Where does that change happen? And to break with your usual perspectives a bit, do you really think, for example, that markets, that the economy, that society is caring about your innovation budgets or something? I don't think so. On the other hand, how much time do you spend on budgets and KPIs and stuff like that? And on reshaping these after a very short period? This is another model that's helping us a lot to redefine these perspectives. It's called The Form of the Firm from Dirk Becker, based on Spencer Brown. And what's happening usually, and I think this is pretty straight definition of changing the way of our mind, I mean, reshaping mindfulness, is that most companies or organizations are focusing the product and ignore what's happening around. Sometimes they care about the techniques. I don't mean technology necessarily here. And what's happening when these people come to us with their strategy papers or whatever, visions, we're trying to isolate the sayings, the fragments, and to put them into these aspects. And then they say and see that they're focusing indeed not too much of what's happening around them, but only on the products, which is probably not the right way to do. And some examples on that, when we stick to society as one of these frames, we're coming from an industrial age where the biography looked quite different. It was pretty straight, had probably 2 or 3 changes in life. But today, in that we call it knowledge society, for what reason ever, it looks a bit different. So people in a very young age have very different experiences. And there's no quiet area after retirement. People want to stay active. People are getting older. And that's why we probably should not talk anymore about biographies, but using another term. And if we're doing that on projects, this is shaping a mind very much. Because when you go further and talk about this generation thing, which is pretty important for many organizations, of course, when it comes to knowledge, expertise, payrolls, we have the Generation X, that's true, but they're also pro-agers, if you want so. They're not the ones who retire. It's a bit weird since we're talking all the time about anti-aging, which is organically just nonsense. But still we do, and this is shaping our mindset. The Generation Y or Generation Connected, yes, of course, but we call them as well Generation Online, because they decide very clear that being online and connected all the time is not the thing. Just think about the yoga market and the meditation market. Generation Z, we call them Generation 9 to 5, because, talking black and white, they don't have too many things to fight for. So what is their motivation to join a company? What is their motivation to work? And it's a very personal motivation, not so much a career thing anymore. And then generation, you name it. These kids are taught to embrace complexity in a very early stage. When you think about Khan Academy, when you think about Hour of Code or something, and it's not about making them coders or programmers. I think it's about showing that complexity is something cool. And in a world that's more and more going into digital services and automation services, the only things people will do is dealing with complexity technology cannot. Whereas we are feared about these computers and robots and artificial intelligence. But there's no proof in history that an industrial revolution took away our jobs, for example. A short wrap-up. From a society perspective, so these are the points coming from form of the firm again. Organizations will, for example, will have more effort to keep their talents because there's more opportunities. And we're saying that war for talents is over and talent has won. On an organizational perspective, there might be the time for a new way of mindfulness because the velocity is existing. So there will be more need for trainings, for more flexible systems in pushing people into performance and to realize that these people won't stay as long as they did before. From a product's perspective, that means as well, keep in mind that multigraphy thing, that means much more expertise organizations can profit from. It's just a question if you open the door or not. Security, another megatrend. And it's not about IT security. That's about personal security. And here the concept of antifragility comes in. It's nothing else than a system that gets better through crisis. And when we say that complexity is rising in our society, organizations, systems, and we lose control in a way that we had it before, probably a new concept should be in place here. And the concept of antifragility is probably explained very nice by 3 examples. The first one is a forest fire. We are all trained to reduce the stress and friction in our organization, in our daily life, between our teams. But that means as well that we undermine the opportunity to understand where crises might happen. And when the bigger crises come up, it's probably too late to realize that. Next example, controller's nightmare. Again, we're coming from that industrial age where everything has to be efficient. But if complexity is there and we're not aware about everything that has to do with that complexity, we need that redundancy, we need that resources that deal with these unknown unknowns. There are known unknowns, we have our blind spots, but how many blind spots do we have that we're not aware of? I mean, Fukushima was built to resist the hardest earthquake in history. That was a nice approach, but not enough. There was no redundancy to go even further if necessary. Last but not least, turkey fates. The butcher is the best friend of the turkey until Thanksgiving. And that's pretty hard to learn, I think, for someone who has responsibility in an organization, because that linear thinking of future that leads to control, or at least to the idea of control, is not possible. So the risk to put these blind spots in place, instead of saying, hey, probably there are many risks around me, and probably I should have that redundancy in place to skip opportunities if necessary because of these unknown unknowns, would be a great change. So implications could be radical collaboration, which has the impact of crisis inside, because you have that friction organized. Second one, the controller's nightmare. Forget efficiency where possible. I know that's black and white again, but probably you can skip some points from efficiency to enthusiasm. And again, future is not a linear estimation. Last example, Nike was saying just do it, but they had a very lucky shot, because from just do it to find your greatness, there's a big difference. And a vague guess could be is to hand over and help people find their own greatness. Thank you.